Hi there, Dr. Pross speaking to you, anarchist artist. Well, in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about Larken Rose. You might know that right here on this channel, not too long ago, in fact, you can see it probably like 2 or 3 videos behind this one, where I covered a debate with Larken Rose and Lauren Southern on the question of closed and open borders. Larken took the position, of course, of open borders, and Lauren took the position of closed borders. And I suggested in my own analysis of the debate, which I say is here on my own station, and I'll link it in the description so you can review that. But I am making a follow-up video in regards to the whole question of open versus closed borders, and in regards to the responses that I've been getting. A lot of people have been misunderstanding my position or just unable to grasp it, and I don't know why. Actually, it's very simple. It's very simple. Let me state from the outset, as a preamble, before I get into the thick of what I have to say about Larken Rose, which will be brief. We're going to make a brief video here. I want to say from the outset that I am, as a matter of fact, an anarchist of the Rothbarian sort. Private too. I've studied philosophy for the last, I don't know, like 30 years, and that's relevant to what I have to say. Now, people, nonetheless, though, one thing that I've certainly have learned in all of these years is that no matter what the movement is, the freedom movement or the communism or the zeitgeist movement or the objectivist movement back in the 60s or whatever, any kind of movement, mass movement, intellectual movement, certainly does have its crackpots. There's no question about that, right? And just its frothing at the mouth ideologues are something that really is really off-putting. I don't care what their label is after that. Whenever I encounter that, it's really off-putting. So whatever their label is, whether it's communist or anarchist, and I've had all types of insults hurled at me. You're a cryptic statist. Come out and admit what you are. You're not an anarchist. You're a statist. I'm a racist too, and I'm a white nationalist, and blah 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 blah. And you might ask, like, well, where's all that coming from? Like, what the hell? I've been an outspoken anarchist, actually, for the last, I don't know, like 10, 15 years. That I've jumped online here in the information highway, the worldwide net, and fully coming out on my stand on anarchism. And that I'm entirely in favor of it. I'm entirely in favor of the non-aggression principle, so that I should be called a cryptic statist and not really an anarchist, that would be cast into doubt. Where is that coming from? Well, it all has to do with the fact that I've been speaking very vigorously against open borders. Speaking vigorously against open borders. So at that point, I guess you might say, well, that's what it is, Victor. That's the issue. You're speaking against open borders. So how could you say that you're an anarchist, for Christ's sakes? And even though I've explained the false dichotomy between open versus closed borders, even though I've explained that it is a false choice, it's a false dichotomy. There is only a stateless society versus a centralized top-down hierarchy, such as you find with the government. It's the state versus the individual. That's the actual principles. That's the actual primary fundamental here, not derivative issues like open versus closed. So, and the arguments that I have against open borders is the exact same argument that I have against closed borders. And what that is the fact that the state is still there. If you have an open border, by the grace and permission of the ruling elite, that's hardly a principle. That's hardly a right being recognized. It's a privilege being granted. Yeah, we'll open the borders, whatever. Even if it's not even a privilege, it just brings a whole host of other horrors, depending upon the specific context. Now, I do state very firmly, most especially in today's world, that anybody who advocates the opening of the borders in this very hostile region that has been stirred up by the Western imperialist powers, the world is a hell trap of fanaticism, dislocation, and very violent, aggressive people. Not all at the fault of Western civilization, of course, not all at the fault of imperialist powers. Some of these people are just freaking crazy, okay? Islam is statism. Islam is statism, and you have to realize that there are some people who take these ideas, these religious ideas, very fucking seriously. Very seriously. And that's the type of people that are encroaching into the Western hemisphere at the behest of various governments, as spearheaded by the EU, for example. And this has caused calamity, financial and life-threatening and life loss type of calamity is what I'm speaking about, due to open door policies and multiculturalism. So that's why, very briefly, I speak against open borders. What's the case I have against closed borders? Well, it's because there's a state there calling the shots, telling people, having to grant permission for people to freely interact with one another, to get permission for that. It's ridiculous, though. Of course it is, right? So that means, therefore, that I am against open or closed borders. And the reason why I'm against open or closed borders, open and closed borders, I should say, is because the fucking state is still there. You have an open border means there's a state still there. Now, as far as Larken is concerned, though, is that, yeah, we have a state, and we all types of encroachments, wealth plunder, the confiscation of wealth. You have drafting of people into wars. You have the launching of wars. All the horrors that the government brings. I don't need to itemize them here, And with all of that in place, Larken thinks that one small smidgen, a modicum, a crumb being tossed by the king is in the example of an open border. There's a crack in the door. There's a little speck of freedom. There's a modicum of freedom. At least we can applaud that much. And to me, that's just fucking ridiculous. That's fucking ridiculous. It's insanity. I mean, we can see in the real world the existential results of an open border. And we can see that with a closed border as well. What we see with the closed border is the government calling the shots. They're still ruling over you. If they open the borders, it's not something to be celebrated, for Christ's sakes. It's now on the issue of private property and private property and public property, which the debate between the open border versus the closed border anarchists or libertarians squabble about. First of all, let me just say, as I said in my other video, that the philosophy and therefore people the mass over are lost in a maze of contradictory, muddled thinking because of the state of modern philosophy. Modern philosophy is riddled with false dichotomies. That's not the end of the issue with modern philosophy, but it is a significant issue that our thinking is riddled with false dichotomies. One such false dichotomy would be the moral versus the practical. The moral is the practical. I know I can make a case for that. I won't do that now, of course. That would derail me for the purpose of this video. But in another case, another example would be the mind-body dichotomy. So there's all types of dichotomies, and the open and the versus the closed border is yet another false dichotomy. The fundamental, ethical, primary here is the state versus the individual, freedom versus slavery. That's it. That's the principle, not derivative issues like closed versus open borders. You know, that's ridiculous. The state is still there. The state is still there. And an open border, depending upon the specific context, could very well yield positive results, you know, sure. But at the same time, because of the states, because of the state and all of its other laws, has a bearing on the question of whether the border is open. Some of those other laws could be hate speech laws. Some of the philosophical sweepstake of multiculturalism has another bearing on whether that society has an open border when it's a multicultural one, or embraces multiculturalism, which it comes down from the left-wing universities. Nihilistic thinkers have brought this horror before us. And then you also have the case of wealth plundering, the welfare state. So all types of horrendous things can happen with when any given country where the border is open. You can look at Sweden, you can look at Germany, and you can look at the difference between that modern Sweden and even the UK and that of Poland, let's say, for example. So in regards to Poland, their borders are closed. They have a vetting process, I would think. And you can see that there has been no terrorist attacks there. That's a good thing, but the fact that they are not embracing a closed or an open border. But you have the issue of a coercive government that thinks that it owns the property, all the property. But I got off my point. I wanted to say about private property versus public property. Once again, it's a false economy. False economy. There is no private property versus public property. All property is private. All property is owned by somebody, for Christ's sakes. And it's just a question of that, whether that person's retaining and enjoying the disposal of his property or whether it's being plundered. That's the only fucking question. All property is private property. Now, what significance does that have with the borders? Well, the repeated ad nauseum of crossing imaginary line. The issue here isn't walking on fucking dirt. The question here is property and wealth plunder, which you do have with the welfare state. You have, as a matter of fact, a horde of third world migrants, economic migrants, wreaking havoc on the domestic population of Europe, and getting that in Canada now, and you have that in the United States. So it's not so simple as the question of are you for open or for closed borders? It's a ridiculous false argument to make. Both can bring their benefits, and both can bring their horrors. And the reason why you have a greater amount of horrors with open borders is because the government is calling the shots on all of these regards. Okay, it's telling in regards to open borders when is too much too much. If we go by the Larken Rose principle here of open borders, and you have a country that has a welfare state. When do you close? When do you close the? When's enough? 3,000, 3 million, 10 million, because you got to hold the principle here, right? We remember we got to keep with the principle of open borders. So it doesn't. We can't end Larken. You know, we don't know what those people are going to be doing, though. Even though they're coming under a refugee status, even though it's been proven, the president has been set that that the domestic citizens of Sweden, Germany, and so forth are taking a fucking financial hit, and plus loss of life, and assaults and physical harm has been done against the people because of this policy. When is enough enough? If we keep say, oh, it's a principle, open borders, it's a matter of principle, it's an open border, you know, imaginary line. Well, when's enough enough? When is enough of a third world migrant invasion onto private property, even though there's a state there, all property that has been created has been created by the domestic citizenry that the government is plundering. Now what they've done to add insult to injury is that now they're inviting, beckoning a whole host of people from other regions to compound the issue, to duplicate, triplicate the problem. That's the principle. And when's enough? 3,000, 3 million, 5 million, 10 million. When do you say, okay, we're turning off the faucet now? When? Now, there's another argument that's been launched at me in terms of like, well, you know, Victor, I don't understand. Like, you're an anarchist, Larken Rose an anarchist. You're both calling for a stateless society. So, like, what's the disagreement? What the hell? You're ultimately arguing for the same thing. So why is there this clash? Well, the difference here is it's been illustrated already. That's been pointed out, is that I'm for property rights. I'm for a stateless society. I am not for an open border while there's a state still there, you see. That's the difference. That's the difference. So I'm not for open or closed borders. I'm an anarchist. I'm calling for a stateless society. So I don't get muddled on all of these false dichotomies and peripheral issues, for Christ's sakes. I stick to the principle. So that's why I think Larken Rose is just dead wrong on this. And in fact, his position, to speak very frankly, is just fucking dangerous. It's fucking insanity. So anyway, I've said my piece. There's absolutely no reason to besmirch me with these fucking bullshit labels of cryptic status and you're a racist. Fuck. Please, people. Anybody, as I said in the other video, if there's people who are desperately trying to make it a point to misunderstand me, people who don't even know me, but they're just so jet set, these fucking ideologues, these anarchist ideologues, fuckwads. And I don't speak that against anarchism or the movement as a whole, just these specific individuals. No matter if I bend myself backwards and forwards and in pretzels and stand on my head and turn around and spin around explaining myself until I'm blue in the face, and there's nothing complicated in what I've said here. It's very straightforward, but they still persist in hurling these insults at me. Yeah, no, fuck them. This is for the people who can actually think. I could very well say that there's a lot of anarchists and libertarians who are pretty good when it comes to economics, the study of economics. And that's all well and good. That's a very important thing when it comes to being an advocate of the free market, of course, right? But when it comes to philosophy, they pretty much suck. This is Victor Pross signing out. Pop goes the culture.